My name is Rafiq Bayani. I've been involved in information systems and information technology for nearly the past 3 decades. I can tell you with a great deal of confidence there's nothing quite like SharePoint out there today. When I began in the information systems or IT universe, I was actually coding in the DOS platform. I also worked with a CP/M operating system. CP/M was the operating system that came after Unix and before DOS. Some of you that have been around for some time, you can read about it. It's something in the history books. You might be able to Google it. I am very much a command line person. I got involved in systems when Novell NetWare was king as far as networks go. Windows only existed in the minds of some people, and Microsoft, the primary operating system Microsoft was using back in those days is MS-DOS. I started using MS-DOS from version 1 and went through the iterations. So I've been involved with Access and FoxPro and FoxBase and DBase, things that aren't around anymore, and Clipper, that's not around anymore either. I got involved with Microsoft's Access. I got involved with GroupWise and NetWare, and was working a lot with Unix and C++ and Smalltalk, and later on got involved with SQL Server, of course, when it was released. Got involved with application development and .NET development. Did a lot of work with Cisco routing and switching. Did quite a bit of work with Oracle. Did work with virtualization, Sybase. So I'm kind of all over the board. I've been around for quite some time, and I've seen a lot of trends come and go. What I love about SharePoint is the fact that it encompasses everything. I used to have to do a lot of the things that SharePoint does, I used to have to do manually. And I never actually got myself a complete solution. I wasn't able to provide a solution anywhere near what SharePoint offers. It's very frequent that I get asked, what is SharePoint, by people that don't really understand it too well. What is the purpose that SharePoint, or what's the problem that SharePoint will solve for me? And I actually have to ask them that question back. I have to ask them what their organization does and how they collaborate within their organization. For example, I may ask if they have a system today that allows their teams to communicate. And usually they'll say, well, yes, if they don't use SharePoint, they have other means of allowing their teams to communicate. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that it's usually not a very good way and not a very collaborative way for the team to communicate with each other. It wasn't that long ago that if you were working in a team on any project, that team was physically present at that location. So if you had a 3 or 4 people team, it wasn't that long ago that the organization required all the team members to be present locally. That's really not the case. No longer are you required to be physically present. Your organization is geographically dispersed, and you need to be able to work with anybody from anywhere in any time zone or any location. And just because a person is not physically in front of you should not make you, the manager or the team member, feel as though the person is not available. SharePoint helps resolve that type of an issue. As just one example of that. In SharePoint, for example, you can create what's called a team site. And a team site allows you to add members to a team. You can specify what kind of team it is. And then all of the members of the team can contribute to that team site. As an example, in SharePoint, you can also create surveys. To give you a very easy way to deal with SharePoint, you can create surveys and ask your teammates, ask other members some questions that you maybe want answered. Let's say that you're about to have a scheduled upgrade to a particular system, and you want to notify the people in your organization that you are going to have a scheduled upgrade, and maybe what time they prefer the upgrade take place. In the evening, let's say Friday evening, or over the weekend. And depending on what kind of reply you get, people would just select A, B, C, and depending on what kind of reply you get, you can base your decision on the information you're receiving. You can also tightly integrate, for example, Exchange within SharePoint. You no longer have to have Exchange public folders, let's say, if that's something that you used to use. Have you ever tried to look through or compile emails from a particular conversation or for a particular project, along with all of your documents and all of the messages and everything that went on for a particular project. Have you ever tried to compile everything that is dispersed everywhere? It's really complicated and hard and not very accurate. SharePoint can hold all of that information in one place. You can even send your documents directly to, you can email the document directly to a SharePoint site so that everything is placed and housed and stored in one location associated with a given project for a given team. You can also do lots of other things associated with SharePoint. You can develop options, and you can develop components in SharePoint. You can develop web parts in SharePoint. You can really do anything you like. You can also extend SharePoint in terms of scaling it out, adding multiple servers to the farm, or you can scale the SharePoint server up, which means that you add more processor and more RAM resources to SharePoint. And you can, of course, have on the back end, you can also scale your storage environment, your network environment, adjust SharePoint servers on the farm based on the type of traffic you expect to receive. You can have the SharePoint site only internal to your organization. You can make it available to your business partners and your sister companies or your branches. Call that an extranet. You can also have public-facing websites in SharePoint. 9 times out of 10, I have noticed that SharePoint sites are usually used for internal purposes and for internal reasons. SharePoint also doesn't have any kind of a thick client. You don't install any client to use SharePoint. You simply access it utilizing the supported browser. SharePoint was one of the very first applications in its time to allow connection to its resources using a browser, completely thin client related. Also, even today, here we are several decades into the information services infrastructure, and even today there isn't really anything quite like SharePoint that encompasses and does everything that SharePoint allows you to do. There are tools out there which will allow you to combine a bunch of things. You can take database from here, you can take web resources from here, operating system from here, developing and developer tools from here, and you can combine them and into something that SharePoint can mimic, or it can mimic SharePoint to some degree, but you're going to miss the collaborative resources of SharePoint, or you would have to be coding and developing for quite some time to get something done that SharePoint does inherently. I can tell you this with a great deal of confidence as well, that you don't have to be a developer to use SharePoint at all. You can construct and build SharePoint sites. You can construct and build your team sites, your project sites, gain access to SharePoint resources, customize it. As long as you have permissions to do so, you can do just about everything without writing an ounce of code. As long as you understand your business, you understand your team, you understand what kind of feature you want to implement, or exploit for that matter, you can do that within SharePoint. That is a pretty big feat. I used to have to be called in for my consulting services and have to design things that SharePoint now does inherently. So if you take advantage of what SharePoint has to offer, and I'm going to be showing you this every step of the way, if you take advantage of what SharePoint has to offer, you will realize the wealth, the sheer wealth of information that you can have access to within SharePoint and be able to manipulate and be able to create the sites, be able to create your environment. You can also create document workflows in SharePoint. This is something that third-party applications used to have to do, well, manually, or have to develop them manually. So this is really something of, in my case, a nirvana. It's a very, very awesome system. I'm really excited to show this to you. Can't wait till you get to see what SharePoint is about and be half as excited as I am. Welcome.